Okay, girls, we're going to do a practice test together. Yeah. Okay. So, to give you an idea of maybe some of the types of questions that you'll see on your practice test, okay, part of it will be online, and part of it will be written, okay? So, to give you an idea of like some of the kinds of written questions that you're going to see. So here are some, okay? So for example, one maybe, it'll be more than this. This is just like a few of them. But it could be like a list of groups, and you got to tell me what are considered good groups, which are called monophyletic, which means that everything in the group is more like each other than anything outside the group. So for example, mammals are a good monophyletic group because any mammal should be more like any other mammal than it should be like something that's not a mammal. So if I give you like a bear and a human and a lizard, you know, the bear and the human should be more like each other. So anything that's in that group should be more like each other. That's a good group. Now there are some groups that are not good. Like for example, what would be wrong with a group that is defined based on the presence of wings? What would be wrong with that? Right, because insects have wings, not all, but some of them do, and birds have wings, and birds are more like us than they are like insects, right? So that would not be a good characteristic to use. Okay, ladies, so, alright, we have we have 5 things on the board here. Number 1, which of the following is a good group? And we'll put a check mark beside what's a good group. And we'll put an X beside what's not a good group. So, Erica. Nope.
Wait, would this be on the written or not?
Written. So, what's a good group? Huh? Primates? You sure? 100%? Yeah, it is. Okay? And then that's a primate should be more like anything else is a primate. Fish is a bad group. Give me an example of why it's a bad group. Because of the charts I showed you. Can you give me an example of a fish that's more like us than it's which one? Yeah, any fish with a swim bladder would be more like us than it is like a shark, right? Okay. What about 4-limbed organisms? You sure about that? Yeah. What's the name of the group that it belongs to? Tetrapoda. Was that not one of the levels of classification in your Tree of Life assignment? So that's a good group. Yes, it is. What about organisms containing the material chitin? I don't even know what that is, eh? Aha! So you obviously didn't watch the fungi PowerPoint presentation. Chitin is a material in the cell walls of fungi, but it's also found in the external skeleton of animals, such as lobster, crayfish, insects. So, what do you think? Is that a good group? It isn't bad because fungi have chitin, grasshoppers have chitin, we don't, but we're more like grasshoppers, and grasshoppers are more like us because we're both animals, right? So this is not a good group. What about organisms using chlorophyll? What do you think? Yeah, it is a bad group. So there are organisms that are not in the group plants that also have chlorophyll. If you go to your presentation on protists, there are other things that are photosynthetic. So they could be in different groups and still have chlorophyll. So the presence of chlorophyll is not a defining characteristic of plants, for instance. What was the defining characteristic of a plant? Having a chloroplast with how many membranes? 2. In fact, having a chloroplast is not even a defining characteristic because there are some organisms that have chloroplasts with 3 or 4 membranes. And they might not be closely related to each other. So your job is, as we know, I know we've done a lot. You have to just identify what we've talked about as good groups and what we talked about as bad groups. Okay? Alright. You might also get something like this. Place the characteristics, adaptations, whatever, or events in order. Okay? So we have the evolution of the mitochondria, photosynthesis, cell membrane, jaws, not the movie, bilateral organisms. What would be, in this case, youngest, meaning most recent, and what would be oldest? Yeah, what would be oldest? Yeah. Whoa, you think the mitochondria is the oldest?
No, cell membrane.
Yes. Cell membrane is the oldest. So I'm going to put a 1. So, actually, we're going to go youngest to oldest. So, yeah, there you go. We'll put that as a 5. That's a 5. It's the oldest. What is the youngest? What's number 1 then? Yes. How do you know that jaws are younger than bilateral organisms? Because remember we talked about, just do a thought experiment in your head. If there are more kinds of things that have a characteristic, it's older. So, are there more kinds of things that are bilateral, or are there more kinds of things that are jawed animals? Yeah. Right? There are things that are bilateral that don't have jaws. So here's the thing, all things with jaws are bilateral. But all things that are bilateral are not necessarily jawed animals. There you go. So there you go. So 2. Alright, now we have 2 left to organize. So what's 3 and what's 4?
I think
Yep. How many of you guys watched the plant video?
I did.
Yeah, I did. Now, way to go, Lauren. You're slipping.
This is the fungi.
Histicons. That's not a plant, though. So photosynthesis actually came before mitochondria. So if we're going youngest to oldest, mitochondria would be younger than photosynthesis. So when you're going through like the characteristics that we talked about that define groups, just kind of have an idea of one that came first. But even if you don't have an idea of what came first, just remember how many kinds of things have that characteristic, how many things have the other one. And the one that has more, that's the older one. So remember the one we did with tails versus limbs, right? How many things have tails? How many things have, we'll say 4 limbs. There are way more things that have tails than there are things that have 4 limbs, right? So then that would mean tails is older than 4 limbs. Okay. The other thing you'll be doing is building a cladogram. Yeah, Pamela. Any exceptions to that rule? I can't really think of one, but I will give it more thought. Sorry? I don't know. I don't know your computer. We haven't talked. Okay. But I think that there might be the odd exception, but I can't really think of one off the top of my head right now. Okay. So, alright, one of the things you'll also be asked to do is build a cladogram. So you have a bunch of organisms, and you gotta organize them. Now what I'm gonna do for you to make your life and my life easier, especially to help us both out, is I'm gonna give you the skeleton of the tree. Because otherwise what happens is, if I don't give you the skeleton, I know this was last semester, then I have to sit for hours staring at this tree. It looks like a bomb went off, and try to figure out what exactly is going on. So what I'm going to give you a skeleton, you're going to fill it in. Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 organisms. So let's organize it, okay? So we have, let's do a split, okay? So what I'll do is I'll give you the skeleton, and then you guys see if you guys can figure out what goes where. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there you go. Alright, so what would be this? The most different.
That would be
So here's the thing. You know how in the Tree of Life you went through your levels to figure out how you can break up the organisms and classify them? So even though you might not know every little thing about the organisms on this list, you should know at least something about them. For example, what's a mushroom? It's a fungi. What's a rosebush? It's a plant. What's Giardia lambda? Okay, let's put a question mark. What's penicillium? Whoa. Wow, you did not watch the video. It's also a fungi. This, Streptococcus, bacteria, and a chytrid is also a fungi. And by the way, I purposely put up a question with 3 fungi to see how many of you actually watched the video. And I can see nobody did. So, Giardia lambda, by the way, is a protist. Okay? I'm going to put together. So, of the 6, what is the most different?
I think it's the protist.
Wow, I've taught you nothing.
No, it was
5 of them have something in common that the 6th one does not have, which we could put right here. And I could say, give you a huge clue, because on your cladogram, you will have to actually put in. Okay, so then what's the most different? So, Streptococcus, which I'll just abbreviate ST. It does not have a nucleus. It's bacteria. Everything else has a nuclei. Okay? They're all eukaryotic cells. So, I'll also ask you guys for points in your cladogram to distinguish the groups. Okay? Okay, we have 5 left. You'll notice this branch over here has 3 things on it. Gee, I wonder what these 3 could... Alright. But now the question becomes, which 2 are most like each other? And I know, based on the reaction I'm getting here, you didn't even know what penicillium was, so I have a feeling you're going to have a hard time with that one.
I think penicillin and mushroom.
So I'll help you with this one. So I'm going to put P-E for penicillium. I'm going to put M for chytrid, just kidding, M for mushroom, and C-H-Y for chytrid. Now, anybody watch the video of fungi? Lauren?
I got up to I watched it.
Okay. What would be a characteristic that all fungi have? What we keep on the tree? We just talked about it, literally like 5 minutes ago. Well, one we could put is chitin. Well, we can put that there. Now, Why did I put penicillium and mushroom more like each other? Yeah, but so is the chytrid. All three are fungi. There's something that unites penicillium and mushrooms that excludes chytrids. They can be eaten. That's yeah.
Do all fungi have?
No. And that's the thing. That's actually the characteristic you put right here. If you remember that fungi, shh, quiet. No one listens when you speak. If you remember, animals and fungi belong to a group called the Opisthokonts, and one of the characteristics is a long single flagella. So the earliest fungi had this long flagella, but then the other groups that evolved after that lost it. So what unites all the other fungi and excludes chytrids, which are the most ancient or most primitive ones, is they lost the flagella. So remember, losing a characteristic could be just as valuable as gaining a characteristic. Alright, so what do we put here? And what do we put over here? So what goes here? What's left? Rosebush and Giardia lamblia. Yeah, I did say it's not a group. But we're not, the question is whether or not it's a group. The question is what's more like. Where? Yeah, but we can't put anything here until we know what we're putting here. Right? So, what?
I think, no,
Now, I spent time on this one. We talked about this organism, and there's something, and I spent time on that one. And if you recall, it's a genetic difference. And I can tell that by the reaction on Angeli's face, which is a very similar reaction to watching her house burn down. I can tell that she does not know. So, Giardia lamblia is the second most different, and the rosebush would go here. Now, the reason is it's a genetic mutation. And let's see if this jogs your memory.
no.
Does that jog your memory at all? No? If you recall, some of the genes from the mitochondria migrated into the nucleus. And in all of the eukaryotes except for Giardia lamblia, the version of a gene called alanine tRNA synthase was replaced by the mitochondrial version, but it did not happen in this group. So what we could say is that this group split off before that mutation happened. Because everything else has that mutation, that would unify them as a group relative to Giardia lamblia. So don't feel bad if you didn't remember all of this stuff, but this is just an example of a question, right? I'll give you a bunch of organisms, I'll give you the skeleton, and I'll say, okay, put it together and give me some characteristics at these points. Okay? So if like, darn, I don't remember don't worry right now if you don't remember all this stuff. Okay? But yeah, worry about it when you get your test. That's great advice. Okay, number 4. Yeah, so this was actually on last semester's test. This is the exact question. So, one of the questions will be, read a tree. Okay? So, based on this tree, which organism is most closely related to the camel? And be careful of trick questions. Which one? Oh, can you not? Okay, you know what? Let me make it bigger. I'll actually expand this box so you can see it. Peccary. Very good. Yep, very good. So if you look, you do an experiment where you say, okay, let's pick the camel and the peccary and the cow, right? And you say, okay, what's the branch point that connects the peccary and the camel? Where is it? Where is it? It's right here. No, it's it's right here, right? This is the branch point that connects the peccary and the camel, right? What's the branch point that connects the camel with the cow? It's still this one. So it's the same. So we can say that they're all equally related to the camel, or all distantly related to the camel. So it's all the same. That's a trick question. Okay? That's a trick question. And I know you guys don't like trick questions. Okay. Which organism, now this was not, which organism is most closely related to the whale? Yeah. And again, here's the hippo, here's the whale, here's the branch point, right? So you can see that if you compare the hippo and the deer and the whale's branch point is further back in time. You're going back in time this way. As you go towards the base of the tree, you're going further back in time. Okay? Now, which organism is most, so this question gave kids some trouble, but maybe I think I'm predicting it probably won't give you guys trouble. Not because you're better, just because I think we've just spent a bit more time looking at these trees. So, which organism is most closely related to the deer? Is it the hippo, or is it the pig? So what is it? It is the hippo. Again, so here's the deer, right? Here's the deer, here's the hippo. The branch point that connects these two is right here, right? The deer and the pig are connected at this point, further back in time. So that means that the hippo and the deer are more like each other. Okay? Alright. You might get something like this. Now, this one might be more of a match, no, not might be, will be more of a match the column. So, but here I just wrote it as a short answer question. So it'll be like, here's the term, and then you gotta match it with the significance or the definition, okay? So, for example, if I put up the word stomata, what would be the significance or definition of stomata? Yeah. These are the openings in what? What kind of plants? In green plants. Land plants. Right? Hold on, I'm recording something. So what if I said to you, okay, what if it's not a definition? What if it's a significance? So what is the significance of the stomata? Yeah, it's actually to prevent dehydration. Because one of the things I talk about in the video is the evolution of land plants is very similar to the evolution of land animals. Very similar, not totally similar, but some similar things. When you migrate onto land, you have to worry about losing water, right? You have to worry about dehydration. And if you saw like amphibians don't have a waterproof skin, they don't have a waterproof egg, they're tied to water, and then eventually you get animals that are like, they have waterproof skin and waterproof egg, right? Land plants, very similar thing. The first land plants, they were stuck in moist environments. And then eventually acquired more characteristics that allow them to survive in more environments where there was less water, okay? And the stomata is an adaptation to allow a plant to exchange gas with the environment, but at the same time control the amount of water loss. And you don't have to worry about that if you're living in water, because you're not going to dehydrate in water. What's the significance? Not the significance, but what's the notochord? Yeah, it's the rod that runs down the back of what? Yeah. It's not a nerve cord. It's that rod that runs. runs down the back of what? Yeah. So it's a defining characteristic of chordates. Okay? Defining characteristic of chordates. What's the, let's say I asked you, significance, evolution of the mitochondria, what would you say? What if on the other side of the, because if this was a match the column, what if it said evolution of the mitochondria, and on the right there was this word? Yeah. Then why would you match up mitochondria with endosymbiosis? Well, what if I don't write the word endosymbiosis? What is endosymbiosis? When something lives inside something else, right? And what happens to it over time? Yeah, I heard it. It loses what? It loses a lot of its characteristics that allowed it to live on its own. So it becomes reduced. Like you have a lot of things that are lost. So then it ends up being like you have to now live in that organism, right? It becomes dependent now on the host organism. What would be another example? What if instead of I put instead of I said mitochondria, or on the right side, let's say it matches the column, right? And on the left it says the mitochondria, or the evolution of the mitochondria. On the right, I could also put something like this, the evolution of what? What is very similar to the evolution of the mitochondria? Yep, very good. Chloroplast. It's actually the exact same story with the chloroplast, right? They both were free-living bacteria that ended up living inside a host cell, and over time they became reduced and dependent on the host. So it'll be a match the column. You have on the left, you'll have like characteristics. On the right, you'll have like definitions or significance of, yeah. No, this is a preview, Sabrina. In a preview, you only show a little bit of the movie, right? Okay. You're going to get a question you're going to get some short answer questions. So it could be, one will be like this. One will be, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you a bunch of its characteristics. And you're going to have to tell me, is it more like A or is it more like B? Okay? So for example, now this is a familiar one. We didn't talk about this in diversity. Okay? But we did talk about tictality, right? So if I said to you it has characteristics that are fish-like, so scales, no neck, and a tail, but it had the limb bones of tetrapod. So, and I said to you, okay, is it more like a fish or is it more like a human? I don't like you, Sabrina. Okay, so what if I said to you, okay, is it more like, yeah, no, she's right. That's unusual for her, but let's change it to a shark. Well, is it what you think, or do you know? No. Okay, so here's the thing. So we have characteristics that are fish-like, and we have characteristics that are human-like, because fish, there are some types of fish that have like little bones in their limbs, but sharks don't. If you look at the fin of a shark, there's no bones inside the fin. But if you look inside our limbs, there's bones, right? So, but how do we know that makes it more like us? You might not know that. I might give you something you never heard about before. And then you'd be like, oh, what do you do? Because you do the exact same thought experiment you did in the first question. The most recent characteristic is the most important characteristic. Remember we talked about Lucy? And Lucy had human-like and ape-like characteristics. It's the most recent characteristic that's more important. So of the characteristics, scales, no neck, tail, limb bones, which is the most recent? Limb bones. It's the most recent one. So that's the one that trumps all the other one. And that was not a Donald Trump endorsement. Okay? That's the one that's the most important. Because if you think about it as a tree, right? If this is your tree, then as you go up the tree, it's more recent in time. So that characteristic is more important than older characteristics. Okay? So in that one, you would say it's more like a human, right? And the reason why it's more like a human is because the characteristic of having limb bones is more recent. Okay? Alright. What about if I throw up this picture and said to you, what is the significance of this? Now, actually, let me move this down so you can see a little bit better. So what would you say? Just sexual reproduction? That's it? That's all you're going to say? So this is a form of sexual reproduction. What happens in here? Two different paramecium become two identical, right? So the question is, what's the point of doing that?
Variety.
Yeah, because it's still sexual reproduction, it generates variety. It's just a different way of doing it, but it's still an example of mixing up the genomes to give you variety. Okay? Now there's going to be 3 short answer questions. I just give you some examples here, but that's going to be basically like your written test. So you're going to see some short answer. You're going to see some match the column, analyze a tree, make your own tree, place in order, and define good groups and bad groups. So you want more, right? Let's stop here.